works. Good evening. I am Donald Nisbet, call sign Biscuit, retired Navy captain for all of 1 year, and kind of the de facto lead for the transition assistance team. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us this evening, and we're pleased to have Colonel Doug Edwards joining us to impart some of his wisdom and experience on his transition. One of the things that the team does is we've got a dearth of experience of individuals from a variety of backgrounds, from government, profit, nonprofit, academia, and entrepreneurship. So we've got a variety of experience, and the purpose is for you that have joined us. If you have any questions, reach out and leverage the network that currently exists with NNOA. I'm going to turn it over to Colonel Bruce Davis. But before I do, any questions that you have this evening, I would ask that you enter those into chat, and we'll kind of go with the flow. But I see there's 4 names that I don't recognize, and I just want to emphasize that these fireside chats are for you. So please, not only with Colonel Douglas, but Edwards, but with the rest of the group, if you have any questions, put them up, and we can certainly put you in touch with individuals that can get answers for you. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Colonel Bruce Davis.
All right, thank you, sir. And what I'd like to do now is to go ahead and introduce Colonel Douglas Edwards, United States Marine Corps Reserve, retired. And as we mentioned, if you have questions, please go ahead and include them in the chat. We'll more than likely focus on those questions at the end of the presentation. Colonel Edwards is a native of Cincinnati, Ohio. He was a member of the Roger Bacon High School class of 1981. While there, he is involved in a number of sports, including football and track and field. He is a graduate of the Naval Academy. While at the Naval Academy, in the class of 1986, he played Naval Academy football for a brief while. Upon the graduation from the Naval Academy and commissioned to the Marine Corps, he reported to the basic school in Quantico, and he finished that in 1986. And he reported to the Ground Supply Officers course in 1987. During his time in the Marine Corps, over 30 years, he served a number of duty stations. And okay. And so his first duty station was Detachment B, first FSSG in El Toro, California. He also served time in Okinawa. He reported to the regimental, and it was a physical officer and S4 officer. He also supported Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm during the Iraqi military invasion of Kuwait. In 1995, he left active duty to start his corporate career and entered the Marine Corps Reserves. After a brief hiatus, he was assigned to Bulk Fuel Company, 4th Landing Support Battalion. That was in Tacoma, Washington, where he became the officer in charge of the peacetime, wartime support team in 1996. In 1997, Colonel Edwards' civilian job relocated him and his family to Atlanta, Georgia. In 2002, he was assigned as the G3 Assistant Operations and Liaison Officer, 4th Force Service Support Group. In 2008, he was promoted to the rank of colonel. In 2014, he assumed the role of the Chief of Staff, Recruiting Support Officer Detachment, Marine Corps Recruiting Command in Quantico, Virginia. Other tours of duty throughout his 30 years of service include service in Thailand, the Philippines, and Korea. He was a graduate of the Mercer University MBA program, the Marine Corps Command and Staff College, the Reserve Component National Security course, the Joint Interagency Security course, and the DoD Defense Support of Civil Authorities course. His awards include Meritorious Service Medal and the Navy Marine Corps Achievement Medal. He's married to Belinda Bolden Edwards of San Diego, California, and resides in Atlanta, Georgia. They have 2 sons, Justin, who is a graduate of Dartmouth College and former defensive end for the Dartmouth Big Green football team, and Jeremy, who's a sophomore at Morehouse College in Atlanta. Colonel Edwards retired in 2016 after 30 years of service. He has held multiple executive positions in the civil engineering consulting industry in Seattle, Washington, and Atlanta, Georgia. He currently serves as Senior Vice President for Good Management Group, LLC, a national construction management, engineering services, technology services, and project controls firm in Atlanta, Georgia. He is currently the scholarship chair for the Marine Corps Coordinating Council of Georgia, and he serves on multiple boards to include the City of Doraville Downtown Development Authority Board, the City of Doraville Urban Redevelopment Agency, and Georgia Senator Raphael Warnock's Congressional Service Academy Nominating Committee. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Colonel Douglas Edwards, United States Marine Corps Reserve retired.
Bruce, thank you for that introduction, man. We've known each other a long time from our times at the Academy, right?
All right, yeah.
I couldn't believe that was me, right? No, really appreciate it. And Don, thank you and everybody for giving me the opportunity to speak to you all this evening. NNOA has been just an incredible organization. I was very much involved in my junior officer years as a lieutenant and captain on the West Coast, and it was that organization is what really kind of saved me. I wouldn't say saved me, but allowed me to network and to understand what other minorities are going through, not only in the Navy or in the Marine Corps also. So kudos to this great organization. Unfortunately, I've been out of it lately, but I do want to get back involved. I told Bruce that. Now's the time to give back and mentor others. So I'm really big into that. As was stated, I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio, a Buckeye fan. Fortunately, we lost last weekend, but bigger even than a Navy fan. Go Navy, beat Army. When I was in high school, I want to go back a little bit. I always had an interest in science and math. I remember when I was in high school, I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to go into medicine, but I also had this desire to serve my country, and I'm very fortunate. And I'm not going to go too far into this. My mother was a high school counselor, and she was the one that she was the one that really kind of got me involved in the service academies, and the Naval Academy recruited me in football, and there off and went. So anyway, got commissioned Marine Corps, mostly on the West Coast, active duty. When I was, I think about the 7-year point on active duty, I got married around that
Join the
time.
meeting.
And I started, trying to decide, do I really want to stay in, or, I started having those thoughts about it. I'm getting close to the 10-year point here. And now I'm married. Not only I'm married to a military brat too, who didn't want to go that type of lifestyle. Her father was a master chief in the Navy, and she was not really interested in moving every 2 or 3 years. So there was a point in me I wanted to stay in. However, I had to, as you know, with the wives, you have to come to a consensus. So I decided to stay in the reserves, and I was getting close to about 10 years, and I started planning, I think about 2 years before I got out, 2.5 years. So if anything, that's the biggest advice, is please start early. Start early, set your path, determine early on, set your goals, and set a plan to get there. I think it was around year 7 when I started preparing, and I knew I wanted to get out. But I didn't want to do it just in 1 year. I wanted to really take my time and decide, what my career choice was going to be. And that was a big thing to do, because I decided, fortunately, while I was in the Marine Corps and I took on these different collateral duties, as you all know, taking the collateral duties as a captain or a lieutenant, some people shy away from them. Some of them take them on and say, hey, this is kind of cool stuff, right? On top of my regular duties. And one of those duties was hazardous waste management. And I said, hazardous waste management, the colonel wants me to take over hazardous waste management on the base, because at the time El Toro was in the process of going through the BRAC. They were going to be closed because of not only well, it was going to be closed, and they were going to move to Miramar, but there was obviously a lot of contamination, environmental issues on the base. And so that was my first entree into this whole hazardous waste thing, and hazardous waste minimization, and understanding the plan. Of course, the Navy was there, and the ROICs, I think, officers in charge of construction. Matter of fact, an academy classmate was one of the ROICs there at El Toro, just happened to be one of my teammates from football when I played at Navy. And we used to go running and stuff like that. And he was kind of educating me on what was going on. It's like, oh, wow, this is kind of interesting, And I actually started just doing it when I was in Okinawa. When I was in Okinawa, I got promoted to captain. And at the time, the Okinawans, the Japanese, were, they wanted the U.S. off, as you know, what's going on right now with over in Guam. But this is 20-something years, 30 years ago, whatever. And the Japanese were real big on environmental issues at the time. Of course, they not only they wanted us off the base, but they obviously gave us a hard time with environmental issues and haz waste and things like that. So that was my first collateral duty, was dealing with that, right? And dealing with the Japanese and things like that. I spent about, and this is during the Desert Storm time frame. I went over to Iraq very briefly, came back. I was on the regimental staff. And at the time we were training a lot of the reserve units, infantry units that were coming over to Okinawa, because we had sent our active duty battalions over. And so while I was doing that, everybody was gone. And so, when I came back to Okinawa, this is one of the duties I took up, and I kind of enjoyed it. I said, this might be something, because it was real big in DOD at the time. a lot of military bases were going through this issue, and I at the time wanted to be an engineer anyway. I majored in mechanical engineering at the Naval Academy for a while, didn't survive long into that, went general engineering, and eventually just barely made it through. But that was my dream. Wanted to be in some type of math and science field, and I felt this was a growing field. This is something that struck my interest, and something that that brought in some good money too, because it was a lot of people were getting paid a lot of money to do this at the time, and this was back when Superfund was going on. A lot of if you all kind of know what that is, some of the old heads here would know what was going on back at the time, and so I decided to pursue that, and it took me about 2 years of sending resumes, and like I said, start the preparation early. When I say start preparation early is the networking part, finding other military officers, or just people in the military in general, who maybe have the same goals as you do. Of course, you got LinkedIn. We didn't have all that back then, right? So we had to get out and network and meet people. And, sometimes as military guys, we feel like we're kind of fish out of water when we go to these associations and events. And I was in Fresno, California at the time. And I don't know if anybody knows where Fresno is, but it's not not the biggest city and the most exciting city. However, what I did is I went to a junior college at night. I paid for it myself. And I knew that I had to, educate myself further. I just went to the Fresno City College and took some courses in environmental engineering, environmental waste management. I think that's what really helped me transition, is that whole networking thing, networking with not only people in the, just civilians in the class, but I met some very interesting people in the Fresno community. My fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha, was prominent in Fresno. That was another organization I networked with my fraternity. Just organizations in Fresno, at the city college, at Fresno State University. I did everything I could to learn as much as possible, because I, at the small, what we call an I&I, and a lot of the Marines know what I'm talking about, inspector, instructor, staff duty. In Fresno, we were a battalion level unit, so we had a very active, large active duty staff there. So in the evenings, I just took it upon myself to just do a lot of reading, educating myself, and going to school at night. And I did that for like about 1.5 years or so, because I know it was coming, that I decided that I wanted to move on. So at the 9-year point, I think it was like maybe the 8-year point, I had a good friend of mine who served with me in Okinawa, who actually is down your way, Bruce, lives in Texas. And he got hired by a firm called Roy F. Weston. Weston was a big environmental engineering firm, did a lot of Superfund cleanup. They did a lot of groundwater, soil water remediation, a lot of federal work with the EPA. And it just so happens that he recommended me. We met each other in Okinawa. He went to, I think he went to Texas Southern University. I think that's where Daryl went. His name was Daryl Drennan, if anybody knows him. But he was from the Houston area. And he had got a job with Weston. He got out before me, and I just continued to network with him. And before you know it, Daryl had made such a great impression in the company that they kind of said, "You know, another one of you guys like Daryl?" And Daryl says, I got the right guy from you, a guy named Doug Edwards out in California, because I had moved back from Okinawa back to back to the Orange County area. And that's kind of where it started. I started, the Naval Academy has a Service Academy Career Conference that they have twice a year, 2 or 3 times a year. I went to that down in San Diego because I was back in Orange County. And I recall Navy having a football game, and they had the SAC conference at the time. I went down there. And it's amazing how things work out, because when I was living in Irvine, California, there was a firm called Fluor Daniel was the name of the firm. Has anyone ever heard of Fluor? Fluor is a big corporation. There used to be a firm called Fluor Daniel. They sold off Daniel. Well, Fluor Daniel at the time was one of the big boys in environmental remediation project management. And just so happens when I went to the SAC conference, they were at the conference, and there was a academy grad who was working for the firm, and I knew they were right up the road from me in Irvine, and I made a beeline over to their table and tried to make an impression about the knowledge that, because I knew everything that was going on at El Toro, all the sites, and what had kind of brought myself up to speed on the environmental contamination issues, the groundwater issues, from all the jet fuel and things like that. So I just kind of started rattling things off, like, they had pictures, and I said, I know where that site is. I know where that site is. And it just kind of went from there. And they asked me to step behind the booth and said, hey, we want to talk to you further. We want to have you to come down to Irvine. I was living in Fresno at the time, and I'm down in San Diego now, right? So my wife and I go back to Fresno, and believe it or not, they flew me down to Irvine for an interview. And next day I got offered the job, and coincidentally, the Weston company, my friend Daryl, who was living in Houston, had called me also, and they wanted to offer me a program management position for a big EPA contract in Seattle for EPA regions 9 and 10, which were one is based in San Francisco, one is headquartered in Seattle. And of course, not knowing a whole lot, what the role was, I said, what the heck, I might as well go up there and check it out. And I had not accepted the job at Fluor Daniel, but I wanted to see what this other opportunity was. So I went to Seattle. My wife had never been to Seattle. My wife had a brother there, so I thought, well, if Seattle works out, at least my wife has some family there. And I ended up taking the job in Seattle. They had offered me, I think it was a better role. The Fluor Daniel role was more of a project manager role, where the Weston role was program management, managing a $300 million program that, just coming out of the Marine Corps. It was a perfect fit because it not only was a federal contract, and I had a federal contracting warrant, I had a contracting officer. I understand DFAS, understand the FAS, I understood all that stuff. And it was a perfect fit because not only did I have a technical background, but I also had a federal contracting background, which was even more important in understanding how to manage a federal contract with the EPA. So things just worked out great, and they offered me more money, and I said, well, why don't I try Seattle? And I just rented out. I had a condo in Orange County. I'd rented it out, and we made our way to Seattle, and it was the right move. It was a great opportunity. Managed a major program across 7 states, across 2 EPA regions, doing all the environmental cleanup, and not all the projects we did all the work, but there were a couple that was what's called fund-led projects, where we actually did the remediation, the soil, the groundwater remediation. Most of the projects were oversight projects where we oversaw other consultants and ensuring the quality of their work, et cetera. But it was a great opportunity, overseeing like 6 other project managers and managing projects myself. One stood out was the up at Fort Richardson Army Base up in Alaska, managing that project. Took a couple trips up to Alaska. It was my first time in Alaska, so that was kind of cool. Walking around the moose and things like that. So, but you know, as far as the transition, you know, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. You've got to spend the time, the effort after your active duty hours, and the networking thing. And let's talk about networking, because networking is a big word. Networking it goes both ways. I found out that networking is not only helpful for me, but I try to help other people. So sometimes when you're trying to help others, it comes back to you. It helps you out, right? And I always try to tell people, I tell my sons that it's not all about you, it's about, you know, helping others too, and helping them open doors for them, because whatever you give, it comes back to you, right? So, you know, organizations, like I said, I mentioned my fraternity. NNOA was another one I networked in. Of course, my alumni association, the Service Academy Career Conference, just as many organizations you can get involved in and participate, and also try to take a leadership role in those organizations too, right? We're all military officers. We know, you know, how to inspire and motivate other people, and how, you know, public speaking and things like that. So a lot of that's natural to us, right? So yeah, in that leadership roles, I just jumped right in and took it on. So those are things that will highlight you to corporate America, whether you're a junior officer or whether you know, like I was, right, or whether you're a senior, also you're more seasoned. I think corporate America, or even, you know, government, still looks for those individuals who are, you know, leaders who can inspire and motivate others to succeed and be successful and move an organization. So I mentioned about finding others in the industry. I still to this day do that. I'm probably one of the biggest networkers out there. I'm in currently where I work at right now. I work for a small firm. I've been with some of the major firms. Bruce has probably heard of some of these firms: HDR Engineering, Arcadis, Brown and Caldwell. These are some of the major civil engineering consulting firms. And let me step back a minute. When I left Weston, which was more haz waste and environmental, my career kind of morphed more so into civil engineering, and that included water and wastewater, eventually included transportation, and now what we call just infrastructure, right? Infrastructure involves transportation, water, wastewater, sewer. Haz waste is still out there. It's not as big as it was in the past, but you know, people and organizations are obviously understand the ramifications of environmental contamination and things like that now, not 30 years ago like it was, but it's still a big issue, and you have to go through environmental documents in order to, you know, do any type of work nowadays anyway. So so that's what I love doing. It's been fantastic. My career has gone very well. There's been some stops for me. I can admit that during the Great Recession, things got a little tough for me back in, was that 2009, 2010. I was area manager for HDR Engineering. HDR is, they have an architectural capability also. They're based in Omaha, Nebraska. So I had the office here in Atlanta for pretty much all of Georgia. And the timing wasn't great. I had to lay off about 23 people because of I had a survey group that dealt with commercial development. So if you can imagine, during a recession, the corporate development gets hit first, then it trickles down to the government, right? So all the pretty much that's what happened. And then eventually, corporations start to feel that they got to start pulling back because the work is not there. So had to end up making some tough decisions. So that's pretty much how I got involved in this business. It's kind of interesting how, coming from an engineering background to having that government and contracting background got me into a program management role. And then I'm more of a networker. I'm not a behind the desk type of guy. When I was at Weston in Seattle, they promoted me and moved me to Atlanta. That's how I got here. And I was interested more in a business development role and being in a management capacity, managing a new office. And that's exactly what they did. They moved me to Atlanta, started a new office. They had an office up in a place called Norcross. I don't know if anybody knows about Atlanta, but they wanted an office downtown Atlanta. It was right after the Olympics, and the city of Atlanta was given to go through a consent order on their water and wastewater system, which they're still under to this day. But it was just the beginning, and a lot of consulting firms were flocking to Atlanta to try to get into this, try to be in this line of business. Well, had the expertise, but wanted, to win these contracts, right? So, Weston was one of them to find out that I was interested in moving to Atlanta, and that's the rest is history. So that's how I got into this business, and I've been in it ever since. It is interesting. I like it because you get to have an impact on development, because development can't happen without infrastructure. And what you're seeing in Atlanta, or if anybody has been to Atlanta recently, it is booming like crazy downtown. And not only in downtown Atlanta, but metropolitan Atlanta, the outskirts of Atlanta, all these cities are popping up, and corporations are moving to Atlanta. The Googles, the Microsofts, Facebook is not necessarily in Atlanta, but they're moving in the outskirts of Atlanta. But Google is making a big presence. Microsoft is really making a big presence here. But a lot of those things can't happen. The corporations won't move unless there's water, there's sewer capacity, there's transit and transportation. By the way, I'm also in transit now too. I'm doing some consulting work for MARTA. If anybody knows what MARTA is, it's their transit agency here in Atlanta. Just about every major city has transit, whether it's bus or whether it's light rail. So we have both here in Atlanta. So I've kind of touched on everything from transportation to transit to water, wastewater. I've been very fortunate in my career to get exposed to pretty much everything from, water, wastewater, like I said, environmental issues. It's all helped me understand everything else and how everything comes together, that you just cannot grow unless you have infrastructure and have mobility, transit, and have water and wastewater, capability, because companies won't move here if you don't have that, right? They got to have their employees be able to get around the city, They got to have a transit system. They've got to have the capacity to build, and you got to have the sewer capacity to do that. They're still, DeKalb County to the east and City of Atlanta still under consent order, but those have been going on for a long time, and they've succeeded thus far. They still got a lot to do, but the city has really, really, you see a lot of change going on here in Atlanta. So with that, I'm open to any questions on my transition. I retired in 2016 as a retired colonel. And so during that time of corporate America in reserve, I was very fortunate to balance both. All the corporations I worked for have been totally supportive. I've been very impressed that they have allowed me to go off and do my 2 weeks during the summer, or one time I went to Hawaii for a disaster relief exercise, which was I didn't complain about. I've been to Korea for meetings, for just going for exercises during the winter and also during the summer. Everybody I've been to Korea knows how hot and how cold it gets there. Where else have I been? Philippines. I've been all over the Far East. Cobra Gold, Thailand, during my active duty time. The reserves were a blast. When I got into reserves, I found this whole different organization that you could play in different areas, right? So I'm a logistics supply officer. When I went and got into the reserves, I started doing other things. I got involved with FEMA. I got a billet with here in Atlanta with, if anybody knows what EPLOs are, Emergency Preparedness Liaison Officers. FEMA in their organization, in all their regions, have what's called EPLOs, are military liaison officers that support FEMA in case of a Katrina event, for instance, right? So if the local authorities are overwhelmed, the state is overwhelmed, then the feds come in, right? And that could be the Red Cross, that could be the Army Corps of Engineers, but you also had the Marine Corps, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Army right there at FEMA headquarters, in case we had to use our capability to provide support to those refugees, not refugees, but those who are impacted by storms or tornadoes, or it could be a terrorist event, right? I went through a lot of Homeland Security and a top secret clearance. We were also prepared for any type of terrorist event that could happen in a major city. So that was a really fun tour. I enjoyed my tour with Recruiting Command. I got a chance to do that. That was my last tour as Chief of Staff. Oversaw over about 100 reserve Marines that supported the active duty component at Marine Corps Recruiting Command. So all the recruiting districts were led, I think they're districts led by 06. I was in 06, and I supported that regional, was it Region 6, Region 8, whatever, with additional support and manpower. And I was there at their beck and call. If they needed me, I would fly to, whether Dallas or whether it was not Cherry Point, but God, where was it?
New River.
New River, exactly. New River, or up in New York, dealing with the recruiting station up there. So it's been a blast. The reserves have been, believe me, don't don't count out the reserves, because I really enjoyed that, especially in the Marine Corps. Still the camaraderie, and it allowed me to get away and turn it on and then turn it off and come back to corporate America. That was a lot of fun. So,
So Doug,
All right.
I've got a quick question for you.
Uh-huh.
And kind of tied to some of the points you made. But the first one is something that I think you can help shed some light on. And if you can just talk about some of the, not the types of jobs, but no kidding. My first job, I was there for X years, and an opportunity either presented itself or you saw the writing on the wall, or like you said, because of economic events, you had to move. But essentially, I suspect that you are comfortable where you are now. But as you separated and then you went into the reserves, obviously you got to keep food on the table. So there's the job, and you're trying to establish your second career, if you will, while still kind of working the reserves, because I know the benefit of that is that's an additional paycheck,
Right.
which keeps a little stability. But the whole idea is that, as you go through phase two, as we'll call it, there's a little bit of turmoil until it's steady state. So if you could just touch on just the numbers of jobs and decisions into, staying going, and ended up where you are. And then probably you already highlighted the benefit of the reserves, because that's, I think, important as well.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I made it clear while I'll start with my first job that I was going to stay in the reserves. I was going to do that, and I always made that clear with every company I've been with, and they've all been very receptive to that, which is great. And I want to make that very clear that I had requirements during the summer and during once a month. And they were very supportive of that. As far as my civilian career, when you get into an organization and you get into an industry, you start to find what you're really good at. And I would say get your foot in the door first, and then obviously do the best you can at what you've been hired to do, and then you move into things that you start to talk to people, and I was better at like business development and sales. I found myself, I started out in project management and program management, and I learned a lot, and I did it to the best of my ability. Matter of fact, I joked with my boss because he had the job before me, and I said, I'm going to get higher award fees. We made a dare. I'm going to get higher award fees than you will ever get, right? And I went in there and achieved that. And we still, matter of fact, the guy's still a good friend of mine today. He's Frank Monahan's in Seattle, but we joke about this all the time, that I beat his goals. But it was kind of like, I need a new challenge, right? And I wanted to, my personality lent myself more to being extroverted and being, working with senior people, like mayors of county commissioners. And I got more into the politics of it, right? Because that was real important to corporations too, to, a lot of these projects have to go through, they got to, go through the mayor, they got to go through council, they got to get selected somehow, right? So the relationship building at the political level was something that was very easy to me. A lot of people, a lot of engineers, run away from that. I kind of ran at it. I kind of took it on as a challenge. And I turned out to be very good at it. And then I got more, it just kind of morphed into strategic selling, right? So one firm I was with, Brown and Caldwell, brought me in as a strategic salesperson for the whole eastern region of the company, which went from DC down all the way down to Florida. So I spent a lot of time on the road dealing with long, big projects that were like, a year, 2 or 3 years down the road that they were trying to position for. And I would be the one to go in and lead the team because I love that leadership part of it, right? I loved motivating that team from that different office and putting the blocks in place to win. How do we win how do we win the project? How do we win this $8-9 million project, right? So I tended to like that more. That was just me. I just enjoy people. I love being in front of people and seeing them be successful. So I think your career kind of morphs. Once you get in, you start to see what you're best at, and that's what happened with me. Is I just love it. I just love the interaction with people. I love the interaction with clients. I love the problem solving part of it, of solving problems for clients and getting into a room of engineers and saying this problem exists with this client. Here's the real deal. It's not really technical. It's more about it's more political, or it's more financial. Maybe they don't have the money to do the project, or and coming out with dealing with the team and how do we provide a solution to the client. That's where I get my thrills from. That's me. So my career doing all that, and then it led into leadership and managing an office, and then managing the whole thing, and then one time I led the federal business for a corporation nationwide that included, Federal Highway Administration, EPA, Army Corps of Engineers. So I did the business development part with the federal agencies. So that was fun too. That was a whole different twist. So I've kind of circled the wagons here. I've done the federal side. I've done the local government side. Haven't done a lot of commercial side. But as far as on the development side, I'm getting a little more involved in that and some of the voluntary things I do here with the Development Authority here with developers. So that's been a whole nother thing that I've just volunteering and I got appointed to the board, but being behind the scenes and understanding what goes on behind what the city council's thinking and providing advice on whether, what areas of their city they should be developing, where is the low hanging fruit and what they should be considering.
Okay.
Did I kind of answer that?
So I was thinking more like, okay, your first job, when you transitioned into the reserves, you were there for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years.
Yes. So I was there. My first job was at Weston. I was, 97. I moved here, started there in, I think it was 94. So I moved here in 97. I was with Weston for 3 years out there. And then I was here at Weston for another 2 years. So I was there for a total of 5 years. And Brown and Caldwell recruited me heavily, and I went to Brown and Caldwell.
Yeah. So, just to help the group understand that
Mhm.
it's not one and done.
Right.
Sign up,
Yeah.
raise
Yeah.
your hand.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I
So-
mean, it's not only about the money, it's about the opportunity and the opportunity to grow, right? So not that Weston at the time, Weston did not have that opportunity for me, right? I wasn't really looking. I was fine doing what I was doing. But the recruiters came after me pretty hard. And don't be afraid to take a challenge too, because I had never, at Weston, they were trying to get into the water and wastewater business here in Atlanta. They were not really strong in it. They weren't known here in Atlanta. They were more known in federal big contamination cleanup projects, right? I jumped to Brown and Caldwell thinking that the whole water, wastewater thing was going to be big here in Atlanta. And they were one of the firms that there was another firm, CH2M Hill. I don't know if anyone's heard of them now, Jacobs now, but they also recruited me. I was trying to decide between CH2M Hill and Brown and Caldwell. I chose Brown and Caldwell. Smaller firm, very powerful firm, and very good. They were smaller, but they could compete with the big boys. So I looked at it as a challenge, and they wanted, like I said, strategic selling. And I kind of jumped at a challenge that, I had never done before, but I was already at Weston, I was already doing kind of business development and sales. But the whole strategic sales, the company taught me everything. All I had to do was, take guidance. And I remember the national sales director had me fly to Denver, and he sat down and showed me the process, and that was it, right? I just learned the process and I took it with me, and I was off running through the DC Water and Sewer Authority in DC, and back home, my hometown of Cincinnati. They had a management consulting practice within Brown and Caldwell. I was also involved in that. That's where I got my more management consulting background, because it was a group within Brown and Caldwell that dealt with the management consulting side of utilities, water and wastewater utilities. How do you optimize your services? How can you perform better? Even though we know government is not a business, but how do we help them become better at what they do? Because we all know that local government is tough, right? It's hard to find people. It's hard to find expertise. But they're also putting out fires, because I've been there before. I've also had a public sector background too. I was a public works director for DeKalb County, which is just to the east of here. It's the third largest county in the state of Georgia. So I had a little taste of that too, because actually my client wanted to hire me, and it was actually during that recession time, and I decided to take a leap into the public sector, which I did. And I had 1,200 employees all of a sudden, right? So the 1,200 employees wasn't, I managed more people than that in the Marine Corps, but that allowed me to understand my clients better, because now I was one of those guys that was putting out fires every day. It's no joke. It's a lot of dealing with people, a lot of, the good and bad of those things, a lot of good people, a lot of bad people out there too. But overall, just very hardworking people, and kind of reminded me of, working with Marines, like that was kind of fun to get out and deal with the sanitation guys, right? Be in the trucks with the sanitation folks and riding around with them, or going out with the roads and drainage folks. Maybe I'm getting a little long-winded here.
Yeah, we got a couple questions.
Okay, go ahead.
We have a question from Michael Oyeteju.
Hey, Mike,
Michael,
what's up, man?
You can read it off, or you can you have the floor.
Hey, Mike, how you doing?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Doing good. How are you doing?
Good.
I wanted to say, I don't know if you saw my message. I want to say happy early Founders Day. December 4th, ice cold. And then my question is, so I'm a young officer in the Navy, and I've contemplated not retirement, far from that. I've contemplated retiring in the Navy, active duty versus reserve. Did reserve impact your ability to promote or your ability to grow versus staying active duty?
No, it hasn't. It hasn't. There was a certain stigma about the reserves. You know, let me back up a little bit. So my last active duty tour was called I&I duty. So I was responsible for training reserve Marines, right? And my active duty staff, the enlisted Marines that worked for me, would grumble sometimes or drill weekend. Oh, the knucklehead reserves are coming in this weekend. And I took offense to that. I said that I had to have a big counseling session with all of them, that I didn't want to hear that again, that we're all Marines, right? Doesn't matter if we're active duty or reserve. But as far as being promoted and stuff like that, no, I had no issues. Just as long as you're staying active, the reserves, and as I can speak for the Marine Corps, they want to see you active. They want to see you in command billets. They want to see you, if possible, go into a combat zone. I had already done that before in active duty. So, and then I got activated during 9/11, 2003. I was gone for about a year, but the biggest thing in the Marine Corps Reserves or in the Navy Reserves, they want to stay active. Don't be complacent. You may have to travel. You know, I traveled to New Orleans once a month for a couple of years. Some guys fret doing that. You gotta stay busy. And my civilian crew, all my jobs, my corporate jobs were very supportive of it and gave me the time to do it. So it was very helpful. I remember I was a major. I got passed over for a lieutenant colonel the first time, and then I tried again and I got it the second time. And then I applied for 06. I got it the first time. So, you know, you're a Marine, right? You're still, you know, I had a lot of interactions with active duty Marines as a reservist, and you couldn't even tell. So I would say go for it, Mike. That it?
All right, all right. Does anyone have any other questions?
Ernie had a question.
I just get a short time, make sure he got his question out. I'm just gonna say one thing, if you think about it, not Marines, but the reserves might give you a better chance at promotion if you're gonna be one of the top performers in there, because the numbers are gonna be a little bit less. So that might help you out also in broaden your career opportunities all at the same time.
That's a good point, Ernie. That's a very good point. And also the reserves allows you, it gave me a lot more experiences. I didn't stay stuck in one MOS. As you get more senior, you can take on billets and different things. And I was doing things that, you know, it wasn't logistics, it was recruiting. It was, you know, dealing with disaster relief and FEMA was something. I did a little logistics there, but I inspected reserve units all over the country. I did that for a couple of years. I probably been just about every state, almost every reserve unit doing CG inspections. And a lot of those units were deploying their reserve Marines, so they had to be ready. So we would show up on a Thursday. I would take the Friday off. I'd leave Thursday night, show up at the unit on Friday morning with my team, have the in brief, start the inspection on Friday, finish it up, continue on Saturday, have the out brief on Sunday morning. We're out of there. We're flown out. I'm back home, go back to work on Monday. So you just gotta take on those opportunities, those risks, and go for it. And I'm glad I did it.
All right, we have another question from Jaquisha. Jaquisha, you have the floor.
Yes, hi. Good
Hi,
evening.
Jaquisha, how you doing?
Good, sir. So I am like Lieutenant Oyeteju. I'm a lieutenant in the Navy. We're medical Lieutenant Oyeteju and I are in the same track, essentially. We're in the same program right now. We're medical service corps officers in the Navy, and we're
Hmm.
newest sessions. And so I guess what has been your observation as far as on the staff side trying to promote because that is a concern, given our specific specialty of being psychologists. We came in as O3s, but
Mhm.
very scary to think about, like, the dream of wanting to eventually make O6, whether that's on the active or reserve side, but coming in as O3 and knowing the difficulty it is to even make it to O4 when you come in already as an O3, and the fact that your staff not line. Any things that you've observed in your career as far as like how individuals have been successful in accomplishing that?
Oh, well, that's a good question. It just comes down to performance. Sometimes, many times, I wasn't drilling and I was doing my military stuff on the weekends. Sometimes, I mean, I'm not saying that you have to do that, but it sounds like you're in a very kind of small field, right? Is that being a psychiatrist? You said psychiatrist?
Psychologists.
Psychologist. Okay. Okay. I mean, I just don't know a whole lot about that organization in the Navy. I know.
Hey, this is Lloyd Mack here. Can I chime
Yeah.
in real quick on that
Yeah,
subject?
sure. Sure.
Sorry. So Captain Lloyd Mack, A5 to the brothers out there. I'm in my last year of active duty. I go statutory in November of 23. Now,
Okay.
regarding the psychologists, the fact that you are in that field, I work at CNIC. I'm involved in prevention workforce, and there's a lot of discussion about mental health. So I would offer this to you. You're in a field that is highly demanded by the Navy. If you stay, do well, you are going to succeed and you're going to promote. So I say stick at it because you're right where you needed to be. It's all comparative, right? Because I think every psychologist that comes into the Navy comes in as an O3. So that's not going to be a mark against you as long as you follow the path that you're currently on and you do the things that's required by your pipeline. You should do well. So continue to press and stay the course. Over.
Thanks, Lloyd.
Thank you for that, sir. Thank you.
And we actually have Captain, is it Adams, Ernie? She's Medical Service Corps.
Are you talking Mary McAdams?
Adams.
No, she's lying. But she does a lot of things with career development and stuff like that, and might be able to give you a hand also. As far as mentorship and stuff like that, I would say get in touch with a mentor, somebody out there, and it doesn't necessarily have to look like you, but somebody who's going to provide you a little bit of guidance specifically for your career field, your specialty in that. I was going to ask, what's your obligated service time? I mean, if you came in as an O3, I'm sure you probably have a minimum of maybe 4, even 5 years.
Yes, sir. It's a minimum of 4.
Okay, and just about that same time, you're going to be coming up for O4 if I'm not too far off, right?
Yes, sir.
So you have some time to kind of basically can make your mark and also get a hold of a mentor, like I said, and talk to them. Particularly, I would almost say anybody in medical service corps, because they're almost the same kind of areas, and you're going to be compared against them. So that will give you some type of hand and maybe a leg up when you start looking at what your options are going to be for the next 4 years anyway, as at least a minimum.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, Ernie, you make a good point about mentors not necessarily looking like us, right?
Yeah.
I've come across some really good people that have been great mentors of mine, from Caucasian to Lebanese to they just been I still have them in my hip pocket today, and I still keep in touch with them for guidance and things like that. They're just fantastic people. So, but yeah.
So Jaquisha and Michael, I would say, take a look at the website, look up Captain Mary McAdams with the career development team, and reach out to her and tell her where you are, what you're doing, and she will probably have a point of contact or get a point of contact for you. Somebody to talk to in MSc, and probably somebody that might even be in your specialty as psychology. But reach out to her, take a look at the website, see if you can get her contact information. If not, look me up. I'm the veterans rep.
We'll do that, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, good luck to you.
This is Helen Davis. Ernie, I was thinking about Captain Margaret Calloway. I believe she's Medical Service Corps, but I don't have her contact information.
She's a doc, but you know
She's a
what?
doc,
She
okay.
might be able to give him a hand also. Yeah,
Okay.
she's a retired Navy doc,
Okay.
and
Right.
she just retired recently. And matter of fact, you can reach out to me. I'll put my contact information in the chat, and we'll see if we can get a hold of her, and she might be able to give you some information too. She's in the DC area. I'm not sure where you guys are, but she might be able to give you a hand too.
Yeah, we're in Portsmouth, so we're not too far.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So, yes, sir.
Okay.
Good enough. Hey, look, at least it's the same coast.
Yes, sir.
It's a big naval hospital, right? In Portsmouth, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, is there any other questions? All right, with that, we,
I was
Thank you.
typing fast. I'm trying to put my stuff in the.
oh, okay, you're typing the question.
I'm a two-finger typer though.
Okay,
Ernie, this is Kevin Francis. I posted the transition team URL in the chat for everybody's access. So that is there.
And I just wanted to, I don't know if you had anything to say there, Bruce, but just on behalf of the team, Colonel Edwards, thank you very much for taking the time tonight. And, this is exactly what we're looking for. Hear your story. And then also for the participants, just being here, hopefully it was useful. I would actually like to talk to Captain Mac offline, because I've got some information, and I would love to kind of stay in touch as you kind of go through your process, because I'm, just literally 1 year ahead of you. But okay, Bruce, I'll turn it over to you for further salutations.
well, that was it. Thank you for joining, for all TAT members, for our guest speaker, specifically for taking time out of your week, and especially for anyone that's involved in Georgia with what's going on in Georgia as far as election. I think
Yeah.
I appreciate you spending time with us on this. And also to our guests. Now, someone asked a question, what is the next event? And my understanding is to be determined, and we are working on that next event. But if you keep tuned to the NNOA transition site and be on our distribution list, you will get information on the upcoming events. That is all that I have. Is there anyone else? I think that concludes the event.
Yeah,
And
I'm
that-
welcome to stay on longer, Bruce, if there's any other questions or,
Okay.
Yeah. And also
I think we could maybe stop the recording and then just stay on for anyone that wants to continue the discussion. I think
Sure.
we can do that as well.
Hey, this is Captain Francis. I'm going to stop the recording and we can continue.
Okay.
Yeah.